Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. Today is Monday, July 11th, 2022, and I'm the host of the show, Cara Santa Maria. And yes, I'm doing some time traveling right now. As I mentioned in the last episode, I am recovering now from a major surgery. I told you guys all about it. I'm recording this before I even go under the knife, so that's a little bit weird to think about it sort of messing with my head. But hopefully I'm safely recovering, and I'm just getting this recorded so that I don't have to work during my initial recovery period. So I'm actually recording this at the very end of June, but today is technically the day this is airing, July 11th, 2022. And I'm just going to go ahead and thank you in advance for all the kind words, because I know you guys and you probably sent them and you're just awesome. Thank you all so much. I'm not going to read out the top patrons for the next couple of weeks because I think it's a little bit unfair in case if I got some new patrons in the meantime, because I'm just dealing with my roles from the end of June. So let me just say thank you to everybody who supports the show. And if you are interested in supporting, especially during these just really intense times, all you've got to do is visit patreon.com/talknerdy. Let's talk about today's episode. So today I had the opportunity to chat with Dr. Rolanda Wilkerson. She's actually a 19-year veteran of Procter Gamble. That's where she works as the senior beauty scientist. She works on a bunch of different brands spanning hair care, skin care, makeup, and pretty much everything in between. She works with dermatologists, clinicians, and beauty scientists at Procter & Gamble to research and report on emerging skin and hair science technologies and develop consumer products. She is her alma mater. She got her PhD actually in organic chemistry from Louisiana State University, Baton Rouge, and she is very active in publishing. And yeah, is just a super duper expert in this really interesting field, something that we haven't really talked too much about. We've maybe scratched the surface a bit on the show before, but how exciting to talk to a beauty scientist this week. So without any further ado, here she is, Dr. Rolanda Wilkerson. Well, Rolanda, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I am excited to talk to you about your really interesting career in the sciences, because I think one of the things that we don't often do on Talk Nerdy, but we should do, is talk to industry scientists. I mean, I've had a handful. I think I had a candy scientist on once, which was pretty cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting.
Oh yeah, she was like, I have the best job in the world. It's amazing. And so it is fun to really sample what all of the different ways that young women who are first starting in their academic kind of STEM careers, all the different options that are available to them. So I would love to hear from you what it is like to be a beauty scientist. Is that a good way to put it?
Yes, I am a beauty scientist, and it is extremely exciting day to day. I get a chance to bridge two passion areas of mine, which is science and also beauty, together to work with other scientists to bring to life new technologies, new products that really help women feel good, and people who use our products really feel good about what they're doing for their skin and their hair. I've worked across skin, hair, personal care for many years. My career spans about 19 years, and I've had a chance to really bridge the gap between science and beauty to help make people feel good.
I love that. And so tell me, what kinds of sciences, like clearly, so your PhD is in organic chemistry, right? But as you were going through kind of your academic training, now looking back on this long career, what would you say were some of the most important courses that you took, some of the most important areas of emphasis to help prepare you for this career?
Sure. Well, chemistry, general chemistry, first and foremost, was especially important for a lot of not just my PhD and my journey, but a lot of the biological and chemical sciences. I also took biology. Those classes were also important too. Interestingly enough, I dabbled a bit into some engineering classes as well. For me, it was really around what are the areas that resonate with me the most. And in chemistry was the space that I really gravitated to. And I think chemistry is in everything. I mean, it is literally in everything. And so I had a chance to experience the different ways in which chemistry plays a part in our day to day life, not only through undergrad, but also graduate school. And then once I came into P&G, really seeing how it's merged in the science of chemistry is merged into beauty care to really develop new and breakthrough products.
Did you always know you wanted to work for Procter and Gamble, or did you have kind of an open-ended approach while you were doing your studies?
I am smiling as you say that. And the reason why is because as I was going through my undergraduate degree, and interestingly enough, chemistry was challenging for me in high school, but I had a wonderful teacher who continued to push me and challenge me. And so I decided to pursue it in undergrad. Then from undergrad, I went to LSU where I got my PhD in organic chemistry. And I really thought that I was going to work eventually at one of the chemical plants in Louisiana. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and all along the Mississippi River, there are different chemical plants. And I interned in one while I worked on my bachelor's of science degree in chemistry. And so for me, I thought, okay, I was always into beauty ever since I was a little girl. Always loved anything related to beauty, if it was the nails or the hair or the skin, makeup, all of that I was really into. But I had not yet really merged the idea of a full career, a full time career in beauty and chemistry. I just knew what I loved, right? And then came Procter and Gamble recruiting at LSU, and I had a chance to come to go to P&G for a 3-day program that allowed me to see. And the goal of the program is called First. If anybody is interested in it, I highly recommend it for graduate students. That program allowed me to see what research and industry actually look like, because a lot of people who go and get their PhD, they go off in academia to teach.
Oh yeah, they
And
don't teach you anything about industry when you're working in academia.
not at all.
They act like that's not even an option.
Not even an option, right? And so for me, but what I did know was I saw, and nothing we have to have teachers and professors, but I saw the level of rigor in the research, and when you go and get a PhD, it can take a lot, especially in the sciences, right? You have to develop an experiment, prove out your experiment, see what works. If it doesn't work, start all over again. And for some, especially in the chemical and biological sciences, it can take a long time to do that, right? And for me, at that point, I was like, okay, I'm ready to work. And so when I got to P&G, to see all of the scientists who absolutely positively love their job, and to go into the skincare labs where they were making products like Olay and see how the formulations were being developed and the different ingredients and how they screen ingredients and then test the products with consumers. And before we get to that point, we're actually employees who have a specific skin concern, they were involved in the testing. And to see this whole process and then also meet the scientists, and they say, oh, I've been working here for almost 25 years, and they look like they were 25. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the place for me. And so that was my journey. That's how I ended up at P&G. And to your question that you just asked me, I didn't think that I would be in the Midwest at Procter and Gamble, and I didn't think that I would stay for past 3 years, but I absolutely, or I should say, and I am still here. And I absolutely love the work that I do because I get a chance to work on brands like Olay with other scientists who are really passionate about touching and improving people's lives and helping make people feel good. It really does make your day a lot brighter and easier when you're working on something that you love and people love too.
I love that. And so looking back, you clearly, as you mentioned, in order to get a PhD, especially in a STEM field, you develop your own experiments and you have to kind of go through and really utilize the scientific method, and lots of things fail, and there are lots of false starts, and then we have to remaneuver. And so I'm curious, what did you actually do for your dissertation, and did that end up translating at all to the work that you do now, the more applied work that you do now in industry?
Sure. So I developed large macrocyclic compounds that, in the presence of different types of sugars, changed colors. right? So it became a chemo sensor, or it was a chemical sensor that allowed us to understand when different types of sugars were present. What we didn't understand was when that happened, how it was happening and why it was happening. And so I had to also go in and elucidate the mechanism. So really figure out the process of how this is happening and why, so it could be better controlled for applications in the medical field. So that was my project as an organic chemistry student. Once I came into P&G, that translated into understanding how different ingredients interact with our skin, with our body, with our hair. And one of the first projects that I worked on was from a hair care perspective, and looking at different colors and depositing colors and colorants onto the hair. From there, I moved on into skin and understanding how different actives interact with the skin on the scalp. And then from there, yeah, scalp is skin, but it also extends into the skin that we see, right, which is our face. And then I started working on Olay over 10 years ago. So throughout my career, I've leveraged my experience from graduate school on elucidating mechanisms, figuring out the processes of things. My professor used to say, everything works, go figure it out, right? And it used to irritate me when he would say that, and we're spending hours and hours in the lab going through kind of the scientific method process, and you're like, oh my gosh, but this is not working. But what I figured out is that, with due process and time, you will come to a solution. It may not always be the solution that you're seeking. You may find what we call at P&G the third better way. And so that's what's exciting about being a scientist and being a scientist in beauty, because you can come up with that third better unexpected way with different ingredients and different products, and also bringing in other areas of STEM like imaging and technology, so that you can bring these benefits to life in different ways. And we've done that through the partnerships that I've had on Olay internally with the scientists we work with, and then also external partnerships with dermatologists.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think when we talk about different types of industries and we see, a bunch of products on a shelf, I think we very much take for granted how those things ended up getting to where they are. And there are some industries where it's a little bit more obvious, the cell phone in your pocket, the computer that, you and I are connected to right now, and we think, oh, there's so much science and engineering that goes into these, technological products. But I think we sometimes forget how much really pure science, basic and applied science, is necessary in order to develop, again, the products that we purchase on our shelves. Everything from shampoo and conditioner to makeup to different types of face washes and different types of treatments that are offered, and lotions, and all these different products that we see. And one thing that I notice is working sort of in a public science communication arena, and on this show and on others, and then of course on the other podcast that I spend a lot of time working on, which is The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. We spend an awful lot of time focusing on debunking pseudoscience, focusing on trying to apply the scientific method to everyday problems and say, listen, this is evidence based and that isn't, and what are our cognitive biases that we use, and blah, blah, blah. And I find that when it comes to the beauty industry culturally, there's a lot of debunking, but there's not a lot of appreciation for the core science. It's sort of taken for granted.
It is. It really is. I can tell you when I came into P&G, it was then that I would go back into my bathroom and my cabinet and go, "Oh my gosh, yes, they make this, and oh, I use this product, and oh, there's this skincare product, and oh, this, and it's in hair care too." And it really allowed me, even as a scientist back then, to connect the dots between the science and then the product in my hand, right? And to your point, we don't naturally do that. And so a lot of people don't fully appreciate all of the technology and the science that goes into the products on the shelf, even especially the products that we use on a daily basis. For me, it's important in the work that I do to be able to help translate that for people so that they can fully understand the amount of rigor and investment and care and diligence that's put into developing a product from even from the inception of the thought, like when the thought is it's conceived and shared. From there, how do we then test that idea, look at the right ingredients, develop the formula? It's kind of like, baking a cake, for example. I can give you a recipe, and then I can give somebody else listening a recipe, and I can take that same recipe. If we follow it to the T, we might get a cake that tastes the same. But if I just give you all of the ingredients, right, and say go off and do it, that cake will come out very differently across the board. And it might fall flat, it may not rise, it may taste nasty. And that is because there is a process from beginning to end and an expertise that you have to develop to be able to have the right cake, right? That tastes right, that looks right. And so that's the pride that we take into developing our technologies, having the formulation expertise, identifying the right ingredient, how those ingredients mix well together, the right concentration, because too much of one thing can actually be bad, right? But somebody can perceive one ingredient as being maybe not so good, but if you have it in the right level and you have the other right ingredient, chemistry can tell you how they work together can provide a unique benefit. And so we take our time to really understand that, not only just to understand how they work together, but then to screen as whether or not they are effective, right? So to test what we think to be true, prove that out in lab, but then also in life where we have consumers and even our employees, our teammates use the products, evaluate them and test them. And the beauty of it is, we don't develop a one size kind of fits all. We all have different needs. We all have different skin concerns, different hair needs. And so we make sure we are testing in the group of people or the population and having inclusive testing that will allow people who say, okay, for example, I have a hyperpigmentation problem or concern, and I want to have an even skin tone. So if that is our goal, to develop products that help to address that, and say, for example, products with vitamin C in it and help to even the skin tone and brighten the skin, then we test with that particular target group of women to make sure that it is providing a benefit. So at every step of the product development process, there is scientific method, scientific thought, scientific rigor to be able to get that product on shelf. And to your point, I don't think a lot of people understand that. And that was what I was able to see when I came into P&G over 19 years ago now, almost 19 years ago, to see that process and then really truly appreciate what I use and the products on the shelf. And I appreciate us in this conversation because I think these types of platforms helps us to really amplify that, so that people can then know and really trust my product works for me. It's safe for me. I didn't even mention the rigor and the safety studies that we do to make sure that the products in full final formulation are providing not only good benefits, but also safe for use. Because I don't know about you, but for me, if I find a product that works, I want to continue using it. So even after a long period of time, it's still safe for that person to use. So it's rigor throughout all of those touch points. And I'm going to pause because I can talk a lot and I know you have some more questions.
No, I love it. I love it. This is like my favorite is when I'm not having to dig. I've got to say that basically two things come up for me. One of them is, kind of back in that skeptical world of sort of like the naturalistic fallacy and like how much sort of marketing and the science interact. And I want to put a pin in that one for a second and I'll come back to it and maybe clarify some of the questions that I have. But I think the one that I want to jump into next is something that you hinted to, but we didn't really dive deep into, which is how important inclusivity really is and how rare it likely is for a Black woman to be sort of at the helm of these scientific questions, inquiries, and decisions that are being made. Because we know that historically, the beauty industry has had a horrifically white bias, and that women of color had to seek out almost like alternative lines. They would have to go to their own, special stores and buy special lines of products because makeup lines were not inclusive, hair care lines definitely were not inclusive. And so, I mean, what what an important thing for an individual who is really making a lot of these important decisions to be making them from the perspective of, yeah, this is my body, this is my hair, this is my face. I'm the one who has been, facing these issues on the shelves during my entire life. Can you tell me a little bit about your internal kind of experience and process grappling with those issues?
Well, I can tell you what I'm feeling right now. Like literally just got chills listening to you say all of that. Because it's humbling and it's an honor to be able to do the work that I've been doing for so many years. I love the fact that it's being talked about a lot more today. It has ob obviously, the beauty industry, historically, to your point, has not always been visibly inclusive of cultures, including the one that I'm a part of. I'm a Black woman. Being by walking into the beauty industry day one, I knew that most people did not look like me. I mean, that was the case in my high school, not college, undergrad. I went to an HBCU, but it was the case even at my high school for engineering professions where I took advanced math and science courses. I would be the only one of two, actually. I remember my classmate, another female, one of two females, but I was only Black girl typically in those advanced classes, more specifically for the engineering.
Oh, wow. So very few women and very few people of color. And of course, you're representing both of these groups, so it's an even smaller intersection.
Right. So I got used to being one of few a long time ago. Once I went to graduate school, there were several of us that kind of connected together to help support each other. And some of us actually went on to P&G before I did. And so I had a chance to, once I got here, they tapped my shoulder and said, "Hey, let me know if is there anything that you need." But even walking the halls, I first started in a lab at P&G that was really academic. The building, the whole building was very academic, where we were doing like really pure research. And I can remember then there were not a lot of Black women. And so for me, or even women of color, there was an Egyptian lady, and I still remember her today. She saw me in the hall, and she ended up being one of my biggest advocates behind the scene. I didn't even know. Like we connected in the hallway, and we chatted a bit, and I would meet with her for coffee or and behind the scenes, she was one of my biggest advocates. And I remember my manager at the time saying to me, "How do you know her? She when we talked about, roles and different opportunities, she was really supportive of you." And then that's what it takes, right? That is exactly what it takes. My mom did it for me as a young girl. My mom is a retired math and science teacher. She taught for 37 years. My mom did it for me. So she knew that advocacy and support and visibility would be needed. And so she made sure I met people who were in different fields to help connect the dots. I think this is also so very important for me to do, and which is why I believe why I am where I am today. A big part of my purpose. Believe it or not, my husband and I were talking about this. Like having a purpose, and then also knowing why you're called to do the work that you do. And it's not just for me to work on a product at a company to pay bills and allow my kids to go on vacations and my family to go on vacations. It's really for also first and foremost too for me to be able to be an example and leave a legacy, not just for my kids but also for others. And what that looks like for me is young girls being able to see what a scientist can truly look like, right? And I know I'm kind of getting away from your question. I think you asked me about what does that internal process look like and feel like. Um,
Yeah, but I mean, it all connects, right? Not just about it's not just about representation and saying, hey, look, this is a career that you can have. It is within reach. It is not just for a certain type of person, it's for all of us. But then on top of that, it's when you're in this position and you have this type of career, you are actually changing the culture.
And one of the things I can say is, as I walk the hallways of P&G, what it looked like almost 19 years ago is not necessarily the case today. So we are making strides, right? Olay, there is a lot of women behind each one of those jars. There's women of color, women who are mathematicians, women who are engineers, women who are technologists, women who are scientists. And so while you get this N of one on this line talking to you about this, I represent a lot of other women who also want to be an inspiration for others. And so I can tell you with confidence that it's changing, it's getting better. But we have so much more to go, right? There's a lot of people in the workforce. Women only fill about 50% of it, and we only make up 27% of the people in those STEM fields. So we have a lot more work to do, and that for us represents what we call the STEM gap. And so for me personally, that internal process that's going on with me is, how do I continue to help make strides in changing this and making it better? And it's an honor and humbling to be a part of brands like Olay and working on brands like Olay that's really dedicated to making that change and improving what we see in inclusivity in the STEM field.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because I think back to actually now probably a very old episode of Talk Nerdy. You and I right now are recording. I'm opening up my spreadsheet where I keep all of this data. Because yes, I'm a spreadsheet nerd.
I love it. Yes,
Yeah.
nerd. That's a nerd, right? I love
Right?
that.
Yeah, for sure. How could I not? And so, yeah, we are recording right now. Let's see, episode number 415. So yeah, I've been doing this now since 2014. And I look back to some of my earlier episodes, and one of them that really comes to mind was a recording that I did with probably one of my dearest friends in the whole world, Val Harvey, who I met back when I was doing a television show, and she was the makeup artist on the show. And since then we have become just super, super close. And she does all sorts of diversity training now, and she's just an incredible person. And we talk about her journey, being raised as a Jehovah's Witness and like just all of this like interesting stuff. But one of the things that was a huge part of our conversation was that as a makeup artist, very often she didn't have access to the full range of skin tones in her makeup choices, and B, very often when she was on a set, because she's a makeup artist here in LA, so obviously she's doing a lot of television and film work. If there were women of color who sat down in the chair, very often it would be like, hey, Val, can you do this? I don't know how to do a Black girl's makeup. And it was like, what? So we still had, and this was only several years ago, a long way to go. And it's just so important that there are people behind the scenes thinking about those things so that people in front of the scenes, like Val, have the options available, and B, the sort of empowerment to say, like, come on, people, a face is a face. Like, you know how to do makeup. You've just got to learn how to use the full palette, and the full palette is available to you. And then we can say the same thing when it comes to hair and different hairstyles, and the tools that are involved in that, and the different products that are involved in that, and along down the line. So it's not just about training the next generation and inspiring the next generation, even though that's so important, right? That women, and especially women of color, see this is an opportunity for me. There are people like me doing this, but it's also that you're changing literally the options that are available, which downstream changes empowerment. It changes pride. It changes self-worth.
Indeed. And that is, in my mind, the most important thing. That's why we do the work that we do in the beauty industry, to do that. because people want to feel good. They want to look good. They want their skin to feel good. They want their skin to look good. And so it's really about empowering. It's really about confidence and being at a place of peace and happiness because you feel good about what you're using and what you have available to you too. It's about options and inclusivity. It's all of those things. So I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. So coming back to the sort of the question that I put the pin in, and this is, coming from my more scientific skeptic perspective. So one of the things that we often talk about on SGU, this other show I work on, or just in general, is the difference between, for example, the food and drug industry. So let's say we're talking about pharmaceuticals as a whole, and the companies that are involved in producing pharmaceuticals and the rigorous testing that's required. And in order to make specific claims, the FDA has to approve certain claims. And if something's, making a claim that's not substantiated, there's recourse involved. And then the sort of flip side, the darker flip side of that is sort of like the supplement industry, where it's not subject to the FDA, and everything just has to have a disclaimer on it that says, these claims have not been uh, reviewed by the food and drug industry. And when we think about beauty, it's an interesting scenario because in some ways it's ultra rigorous, and in other ways it's kind of the wild, wild west. So you find yourself, I can imagine, in this precarious position where you're saying, listen, this is very rigorous science. These are the investigations that we set up. These are the standards and the thresholds that we use in order to qualify a specific claim. But the regulation, like there is regulation there, but it's different. So how do you find yourself navigating this world of like science and marketing and how they sort of come together?
You know, it's funny because again, my husband's an engineer, so we have these kinds of nerdy conversations, right? And we were talking about exactly this yesterday, actually. It, it's very interesting because, and I'll tell you how it came about. My mom brought up the topic. Oh, I saw such and such has a new skincare line, and I said, and she said, well, what makes that person able to have a skincare line? Like, and I said, well, Mom, Ava, who's my 5-year-old daughter, if somebody wanted to say, okay, hey, we're going to develop a line and Ava, we're going to call it Ava. Okay. Person X could call up a contract manufacturer and you say, okay, I heard this ingredient was bad, so take that ingredient out. And now I want this type of product, that type of product, and this type of product, and put a label on it. I want to call it AVA. Okay. And then that product might end up being sold online, and there may be some claims that are made, but not the regulation around it. So that's a small company, right? And I don't want to, um, this is not bashing any small business owners or small companies, but this is to talk to the level of rigor where you have investment in technology, investment in research and development, and why that's actually really, really important. So once those products are developed, you have to have the ability to prove out one that they're safe, the ingredients are safe for long-term usage, one that the products are beneficial across in a clinical study. While the beauty industry is not regulated, unless it's a drug product in the beauty industry, the cosmetic beauty industry is not regulated by the FDA, so to speak. The larger companies like, or larger brands like your Olays of the world and P&Gs of the world, we have to be able to substantiate our claims. If we have product on copy in magazines and television, and somebody says, wait a minute, I have a question about that. We have to be able to prove that we have our clinical studies, we have our consumer studies, we have our technical studies to substantiate those claims that we make or substantiate those benefits. We also have internal legal and regulatory and safety who put our products to the highest degree of internal testing and scrutiny to make sure whatever we're saying that that product does and our ingredients that we are testing actually do what they do. And this is why I decided to come to work for P&G Beauty, because that level of rigor is there. And that level of investment in research and R&D for brands like Olay, which I absolutely love, to demonstrate the benefits across different ethnicities, no matter what product variant or SKU we're putting out, is there. And it's a part of a process that happens over a course of a couple of years to develop different product lines and different product SKUs and variants. And then that's not even talking the investment that takes to identify ingredients. For example, niacinamide, we've led the way in understanding niacinamide, the benefits of skin. It is a power packed ingredient that provides so many different benefits on skin. And then when combined with other ingredients, we see additional benefits that can provide new areas of skin responsiveness in a positive way for women who choose to use our product. And so we have to be able to test that. We have to be able to have that in testing and in research and innovation, no different from the pharmaceutical industry requires a big investment. And that's the kind of level of rigor and commitment that we have behind what we do. And I can say not all companies do that. So that's I'll end with that.
Yeah, for sure. And so you think about things like there's niacinamide, like you mentioned, hyaluronic acid, retinol, like these certain ingredients where there's like a really robust literature supporting them. And you'll see that even on the medical side of things, dermatologists, individuals with board certifications and licenses who are talking about and recommending certain types of ingredients. And then on the flip side of that, you very often will see examples where there's like some hot new trend, which really isn't evidence based at all, but has like a good marketing hook to it. And I'm wondering, how do you navigate when, let's say, a team of non-scientists, individuals within the company, for example, or just on this, in culture, say, "Ooh, we want to think about." I don't know, let's pick something at random, like raspberry serum. I don't know, I'm picking a random ingredient. And it's like you've looked at the science and you're like, that literally does nothing. This is all marketing. It's in no way scientifically based. How do you navigate, say, kind of being the skeptic in the room and saying, I don't think that that's where we should be putting our efforts because that's just hype. That's not science.
The great thing is that I work with a lot of other scientists and engineers who rely on what we know to be true from a data-based perspective. And from the marketing side, our marketing partners, our commercial partners, they trust us, right? If we'll do due diligence around an ingredient to understand, explore, we'll evaluate, we'll screen. We have high throughput screening that we're able to put ingredients through. We'll go through all of those approaches to actually understand. So if you bring an idea, hey, we heard that this was the next biggest thing. We'll do our due diligence. Obviously, as scientists, you have what you believe to be true, but then you go out and prove it. And once we do that, and we have the data to show, hey, this really doesn't provide a benefit as it is believed to, our marketers, our partners, they trust us, and so we move forward with what we know to be true as a team, what we know to be true based on data. And if it's not true, then we don't move forward with elevating it in any way.
Yeah, for sure. And that's so fundamentally important because I think one of the things that I mentioned earlier is this idea of the appeal to nature fallacy. And it's something that we see very often as a sort of cognitive bias culturally. Like, you'll literally hear people say things like, I don't want chemicals in my products. And it's like, oh, okay, everything's a chemical, first of all. And like,
Everything is a chemical, yes.
water is a chemical, and oxygen. And of course, you as a chemist, that's purely what you do. You study chemicals. And so how frustrating must it be when you do have a certain amount of pressure to kind of conform to a appeal to nature fallacy, like this is quote natural, therefore it is better. And I can imagine they are often answering to multiple masters, because not only do you want to make a product that works, you want to make a product that also sells. And you've got to find that balance between the fact that the vast majority of consumers may not have the scientific literacy that we hope they have. I mean, this is what we're all working towards, right? Is improving scientific literacy, but they may not have it sort of at the baseline. And so how do you navigate that?
The way so when I have these kind of conversations and the question comes up around, it has a chemical in it, and so I don't want to use it. And I love that you actually said too just now, there's chemicals are in everything. I I saw an interesting depiction of the composition of a banana and an apple. And what I shared was, I can give you this composition of this banana and this apple and not tell you it was a banana and apple, and you may go, "Oh, I wouldn't want to use that product." Because why? It's chemicals. Chemicals are in everything. And then when we think about safety and of ingredients and amount of ingredients, I oftentimes tell my kids, I don't want them to be quote unquote scared of a chemical. I want them to be aware of what different types of chemicals are. And any one thing and too much of an excess amount can be harmful. You talked about water being a chemical. If we drink too much water, it can be toxic to our body. Broccoli, there's certain foods that we eat. If we eat too much of it, which broccoli is composed of different chemicals, it can be toxic to our body. And so it's all about the right balance of nature inspired and science. And those two come together very naturally. So that's how I navigate it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it must be a very tough kind of place to navigate, but at the same time, the work that you're doing probably takes precedence. It takes priority. So the idea here is, stay the course, keep developing these solutions to individuals' problems, and the trends, they come and go, they ebb and flow. And you do notice sometimes that I think some companies, and again, this isn't like to compare company to company or anything, but some different individual companies, you can tell that their kind of tack is to follow those trends, and for others it's to have a sort of fundamental business model that's like you can fall back on all the time. So within 6 months or a year, that product's no longer going to be the hot thing, and nobody's going to want to buy it because it doesn't have that key ingredient like acai or something like that, where you're like, I don't know about the evidence behind that. Just to have something that's sort of tried and true and that's really, really evidence based means that it has staying power.
Right. And to me, those are the ingredients that have, the research number of years of research behind it. We've had over 65 years of a science first approach to skincare, understanding our ingredients, understanding the engineering and how we develop those products, and then also how do we then leverage technology to prove out that the products are disprove when our formulas aren't working like we want to provide a specific benefit. And it's really merging the two between understanding ingredient science and formulation. And that happens over years of research around different ingredients like the retinoids of the world and niacinamide and hyaluronic acid. It's really, what are those ingredients that have that tried and true staying power, and then looking at then as we continue to develop and continue to innovate and continue to improve, because science is not stagnant, it has to continue to grow and get better. And the beauty of that is that we can, as we continue to innovate and research and learn on new things. And so there may be other ingredients that come into the picture that help make those other ingredients that we've already explored and identified work better. And so that's our approach to science. And sometimes it might be inspired by what's happening in nature, but it's not necessarily just natural.
Right, right. And on the flip side of that, and you've touched on this a few times, and so I know this is a little bit maybe controversial, but I hope that we can really dig deep into this. The flip side of that is, there are these specific ingredients that are heavily tested that may be included, that have a specific benefit, but you really did focus too on long term safety, and sometimes we learn things later on that we did not know at the beginning. And I point to a specific example like talc, for example, that in and of itself, talcum is not dangerous, but we know that talc grows and it's like crystalline and it's in nature in its form right next to asbestos. And it's really hard to tease talc away from asbestos. And we've learned this over the years. And that has raised certain alarm bells. Or, for example, if you know much about certain specific dyes, like industrial dyes that have been shown over several decades to be damaging to human health and safety, or, the main ingredient in Teflon, I think it is. There's that, what is it called? There's like a great documentary about some of these industrial chemicals that now we find in our blood that like did not exist 50 years ago. And so how do you navigate that too when there's this rock star ingredient that really helps, keep, let's say, a formula in solution, or it really helps with like the hydrophobic nature of something that has a real benefit to makeup. But then we find out later on, this may not be healthy in the long run.
As a scientist, I would say that we always have to continue to explore and understand, what's true today, and then how and why that could evolve. Our environment that we live in drives so many different things, right? It drives the choices that we make. It drives how our skin responds. It drives even how our products interact with our skin. And so the environment we live in today is not the environment that we've lived in many years ago, right?
Oh, for sure. You
So
have to think about climate change and how all of these products are adapting with climate change, for example.
all of those things have to come into consideration as we are developing and looking at what's true now. And then also, how can that change based on different internal and external factors? And because of that growing desire or need to learn what factors influence and the variables that can come into play when it comes to product development, we have to have our mind open to that. And as scientists, I can say that we do. And this is why you have regulatory specialists and safety experts, and then also even legal, holding us accountable to how do we talk about those products and the benefits, and then scientists to really go in and explore. And so when you ask the question around, if there's a particular ingredient that we learn that may not necessarily or a scientist becomes aware of that this ingredient may not necessarily be beneficial, we always need to be understanding what are the other new ingredients that are available. And I say this across the board, if you're going to pull something out of a product, you better know what you're putting in is actually better and beneficial, not just in a single use or that ingredient alone, but how does it work in the formula? Is it still safe, and is it still providing a benefit? And so it can't just be about let's pull one thing out and put something else in it. You have to have a company that's dedicated, and a brand dedicated to that scientific rigor and research to make sure that they're bringing to life the best product and the best solutions, not only from an efficacious perspective, but also from a safety perspective too. And that's where I find enjoyment and excitement and comfort in the work that we do, because I know that due diligence is there every single day, especially for the products that we develop like Olay.
Right. So I'm curious, we're sort of coming up towards the end of the hour, and I don't want to keep you all
Has it been
day.
an hour
Um,
already? Oh my
I
gosh.
know it's bananas, right? The show goes so fast. But I'm curious, I guess before I get to my closing two questions, I ask my all my guests on the show the same two questions, so we always end the same way. But before we dive into that, I'm just wondering if there's anything we didn't touch on. I know it's been a little all over the place, which is kind of my way. If there's anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to make sure there was said. And it's okay if there's not, but if there's anything you've been like, oh, I really wanted to get that out.
We've really covered a lot of it, but I want to double click on the importance and I believe the purpose of why I do what I do today is again, as we look at inclusivity in beauty and women in STEM and the efforts needed to reach and then surpass goals that we have, it's so very important for the listeners here to know that one, you can be anything that you desire, especially in the area of STEM. Even when you may not see yourself reflected right now, you have the opportunity to change that. And for those of us that are already there, and parents, relatives of young girls or young women who are seeking and desiring or may not even know that this is a space that they can go into. Help them to open up their eyes to all of the opportunities. And in this way, in partnership with your listeners and the scientists that I work with and the dermatologists and all of the other STEM experts, we can really help face the STEM gap. And so that would be the one double click that I would go back on because in my opinion, this is the reason why we have these types of conversations.
Here, here. Yeah, no, I completely agree. So listen, when we close out the show, all of my guests kind of weigh in on these very big picture issues, and I'm going to contextualize them a bit for you and take all the time that you need to think because I know these are really big questions, but I would like to know from you when you think about the future in whatever context is relevant to you. So, you mentioned that you're a mom. Obviously, we've talked about your career. We've talked about society as a whole. So, whether this is personal, whether it's vocational, whether it's let's say communal or global or even cosmic, who knows? I have physicists on the show a lot, so they sometimes take a different perspective. I would love to know first, what is the thing that keeps you up the most at night? The thing you're most concerned about? Maybe you're even feeling a bit pessimistic, cynical about. And then, so that we end on a more positive note, on the flip side of that, where are you finding your hope, your optimism? What are you truly looking forward to?
I will I'll start first with the positive. And that is I'm excited about the open conversations that are being had. The fact that more inclusivity is being recognized today. Like before people used to think it but wouldn't say it or ignore it. Well, it's not being ignored right now and it's being talked about and it's being said. And because that's happening, the world will be a better place for people of all color, for my children, for my little girl who's 5, my little boy who's 10, and my other little boy who's almost 9. The world will be a better place for them because inclusivity is recognized. It's being recognized. Hopefully by then it's normalized, right? It's expected. And so as a result, when my daughter and my children walk the aisles in a store, they can see more products that are made for them and not just made for them, but for other people too that they would want to use and know that it works for them. And so I do believe that what makes me happy and excited, I won't go to what keeps me up at night. I'll focus on, you know, the part that makes me really excited is the fact that changes are happening. Brands like Olay, we're committing to making a change, and the more conversations are being made and coming about, and then as a result, it'll be a better place for the people I love and the people you love, and that's what makes me excited.
Well, I love that. Thank you so, so much for being with us today, Dr. Rolanda Wilkerson. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. Thank you for being here.
Same here. Thank you. Pleasure as well.
Of course, and everyone listening, thank you for coming back week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.